Let's start this webinar. We're going to go through all of our panelists. They're going to introduce themselves and tell you about what the health issue, what was the time in their life that they recovered from that, as I was joking earlier, made them a panelist tonight. So Carl Lundgren, you're in my top left-hand corner. I'm gonna snake through all my panelists here, but let's start with you, Carl.
Hi, I'm Carl Lundgren. I'm trombonist, and about 6-7 years ago, something like that, I started to have some issues with my wisdom teeth. It was a long and slow, painful thing, culminated in getting them all out. The subsequent surgery caused my jaw muscles to spasm like crazy for like a few years afterwards. Ended up with really bad TMJ disorder, temporomandibular joint, basically where your lower jaw attaches to your head and to your spine. So it affects your posture, your proprioception, and of course your trombone playing. So I pretty much lost the ability to play almost anything at all. Extreme pain, many years of slow recovery. So it's been a fight to get back to a natural way of playing. I had to basically sort of start over in a lot of aspects.
And Carl, we'll get into it, but did you have mentors along the way, or was this something that you kind of had to deal with on your own?
Well, of course, you have as many mentors and friends as you're willing to reach out to. And one of my regrets is that I didn't handle the situation nearly as well as I should have. I should have been reaching out for help much earlier, sooner than I did, and which ultimately ended up kind of flattening my bones and like literally flattening my jaw bones, because they just do this, and damaging a whole bunch of nerves and stuff. So I've got partial face and arm numbness, which would not have been the case had I reached out for help sooner. So yeah, I've got great people in my life, and I didn't necessarily ask for help. So don't do what I did.
Lesson number one, everybody, ask for help. I'm sure we'll hear that from a lot of people. All right, Melvin, you're up next.
Hello, my name is Melvin Jones, a trumpet player here in Atlanta, Georgia. And I've been kind of injury prone for a good portion of my life. So I have a lot of things that I've recovered from over the years, and somehow miraculously made it back to trumpet. In high school, boxing was my side thing for whatever reason. And I still have the scars from that back in the day, but I still played trumpet. And then I was attacked during my freshman year at Morehouse College. And after that attack, it kind of changed the shape of my head, and also kind of destroyed a good portion of, this side of my face. And I still had to play some kind of way. So I developed a lot of bad habits as a result that took decades to get past. And now, right when I think things are going great, COVID hit me last year, the beginning of the year, or at least what my doctor and I believe is COVID. And since then, I've had a series of breathing problems, always shortness of breath. I still consider myself to be on a recovery path as far as that's concerned, but it has completely changed the way I approach the instrument, and has changed the way I kind of pace myself now. So yeah, good times.
Melvin, I didn't know about all of that. I knew about the COVID.
Oh yeah, it's been an interesting career.
Jeez. Thanks, Melvin. Josh, you're up.
What's up, everyone? Josh Rzepka, trumpet player in Chicago, and I've been through a couple, I'd say 3 kind of major incidents over the last 15 or 16 years that have kind of ended up sidelining me for some period of time. I've had 2 hernias in different spots, and then not quite 2 years ago, I had a neck injury, and no one ever actually told me like, oh, you damaged or hurt or, like said a specific thing. But basically, something in my neck got very strained, and it was like, it was basically like a repetitive, issue from being too tense. And that was a little over a year of until I kind of really felt recovered from that. The hernias, both of them ended up having surgery, and I was off for anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, after each one of those, and then coming back slowly. So, of course, my first hernia was like right before my junior recital at Oberlin, I think. Maybe like a couple weeks before, or just before the jury. I just remember I went into my lesson, and I was like, thought the world was ending. And I was like, I have to reschedule. My doctor said that I had all these, I need surgery. Of course, my teacher's like, oh my God, what's happening? I'm like, oh, I have a hernia. And Roy Poper at Oberlin, he's like, oh, you'll be fine. I've had 3. And I was like, it kind of assured me, but then, it was good to be able to have someone to talk with that had been through the process.
Yeah, part of that beauty about mentorship roles is because as soon as something hits you that throws off your balance, the world is ending and the world doesn't have time for you to recover. And the mentors know that the world has time for you to recover. It's nice getting that shock of reality. Did you have surgery on those hernia? I guess I am hernia illiterate as a trumpet player.
Yeah. So like a hernia, if you have one, it's never gonna fix itself. Like there's no circumstance ever where it will heal on its own. So the only way that you can correct it is by having surgery. And there's like two methods. They're either gonna go in there and kind of sew you up, and that's it, or they're gonna go in and they're gonna take like a piece of mesh, and then they're gonna put that inside, and then they're gonna sew you up. And if you're a trumpet player, that's what you want, because that's much stronger.
Not the one they have all the commercials for.
Yeah, and don't get the one that all the personal injury lawyers are talking about. Get
I'm just
the other
assuming.
mesh.
Yeah.
See, it's 15 minutes into this webinar and already you've gotten multiple pieces of good advice. Get mentors, use the mesh. All right. Chris O'Hara, you're next.
My name is Chris O'Hara. I'm here in Chicago. I'm the trumpet professor at Elmhurst University, and I play with the Alliance Brass. And man, I feel extremely lucky already, having heard some of these stories. I've had one hernia, and that was enough. And yes, absolutely, the mesh is the way to go. But yeah, that it will knock you out for a good amount of time, and how you come back from any kind of time off is important.
Thanks, Chris. And Tom, you're up.
Hi, I'm Tom Mccaslin. I play tuba in the Calgary Philharmonic Orchestra up in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and teach at the University of Calgary. I am a cancer survivor, and in September of 2019 had a stem cell transplant to beat and cure my cancer. So essentially my story of recovery is coming back from not necessarily the cancer itself, but all the treatment that I had to cure that. And it was a difficult process, but I'm doing okay. And actually I'm doing great. I'm just bored and cold most of the time this year. But yeah, it's a challenge. So that's my story in a nutshell. Yeah.
I got to know Tom as he was going through the cancer and the recovery. And man, I just, every single time I'd hear from him or see an update on your Facebook, I was like, man, he's such a Superman. Like I couldn't imagine going through all that. And I have a friend now going through the recovery from the chemo. And yeah, it sounds like the recovery, depending on what type of chemo you had or what type of treatments you had, can be more painful than the actual sickness along the way. Moving on, Decker, you're up next.
Hey there, I'm Decker Babcock. I'm a trombone player here in the frozen state of Denver, Colorado. It was -6 most of the day today. It's a fun time. I recently have finished a little bout with COVID-19. I ended up having to miss a pretty important recording session and one of the DENIS WICK webinar podcasts. Yeah, it was not fun. And I'm still, same thing with Melvin. I have the shortness of breath, and I've got a bunch of things coming up that I need to play my large bore trombone for. And playing the large bore trombone coupled with being at altitude and constantly short of breath, it's extremely difficult. to kind of get back on your feet. But there's ways of getting around that and getting better. So I'm in the process right now of kind of getting there. So I apologize if I cough a bunch.
Thanks, Decker. Evan, you're up.
Hey guys, Evan Clifton, I'm a trombone player here in Nashville. So kind of my injury situation was about 5-6 years ago now. It was the summer before I started my master's at Michigan State. I came down with focal dystonia. Task-specific focal dystonia is the full name, because it's a neurological disorder that's connected to some specific task. So for me, it was playing trombone, and I just woke up one day and these muscles on the sides of my embouchure were just in searing pain. I had no idea what was going on. I could barely talk. I could barely eat. I was scared out of my mind. And so I basically just put the horn away, didn't play for 2 weeks. Thankfully, it was just after the end of the orchestra season. So I had, a few weeks break before summer stuff started. And it was a very, very, very long process to come back, which started with about 3 or 4 months of just kind of having no idea what was happening and talking to people, trying to find anything that would work. And I would find some stuff that would help for a week, 2 weeks. One suggestion from a friend was to switch mouthpieces a lot and kind of go for the muscle confusion route. And so actually the last time I played with the Cleveland Orchestra, that's what I did. I used a different mouthpiece on every service, sometimes 2 in one service, just to confuse my face so if things would keep working. And it sucked. And eventually I connected with actually one of Carl's old teachers, Jan Kagarites. She's a wonderful, wonderful human. And good friends with my former teacher at Western Michigan, Steve Wolfenbarger. And so I connected with her. We started working together. We worked together every week for about 6 months. And she's kind of the focal dystonia guru, as far as I'm concerned. She runs her own company called I think it's Musicians Wellness of North America or something like that. She's out of Chautauqua, New York. And so we worked via Skype weekly for about 6 months, and then kind of as needed, once or twice a month for another 3 months or so. But she said I was dystonia free after 3 months of working with her, but it took a full year before I was comfortable playing again. Not to where I was before, just even remotely comfortable. So it was a long road. So, but that's the nutshell.
There we go. Thanks, Evan. Monica, you're up next.
Hey everyone, I am Monica Benson, and I am a trumpet player based out of Chicago. Trumpet player, music educator, kind of freelancer. And my injury, so back in 2015, I had a group of friends and we were planning on hiking all the way across the Grand Canyon and all the way back. So we were doing a practice hike in a forest preserve in March, and we had like our weighted packs on and everything, and we were just hiking, and it was still pretty cold. There's sometimes still snow on the ground here in Chicago in March. And so I had this patch of ice, and because I had a lot of extra weight on me, my weight distribution was off, and I literally face planted. And I broke my mustache bone. don't remember the name of it, but I fractured this bone right here and broke my 2 front teeth entirely, like in half. So that was a pretty massive recovery. I had to have 2 root canals on my front 2 teeth. And it just took a while to kind of get everything back. I luckily had no, other than the 2 roots in my 2 front teeth, I had no nerve damage or anything. So I had to switch mouthpieces. I was supposed to go to a summer festival that year, and I went, and I got really lucky with the teachers that were there. Actually, Phil Smith was there that summer, and it was like the summer like right after he got diagnosed with focal dystonia, so he had a lot of really good things to say. And it was up in Canada, so there was I'm gonna butcher her name, Manol Lefronk, I think is her last name. I'm terrible with names. But she was great, and she used to play with Canadian brass, and she had actually 2 injuries. She had one where she was playing with Canadian brass, and the tuba player came up, and when he brought his horn up, he actually like jammed her horn into her face. And so she had a lot of chop issues because of that. And then like a few years later, she ended up getting hit in the face with a ski pole. So she had like 2 injuries. So she had so much good information for me that summer, because it was like, I think it was like maybe a month after this had happened, I was at this festival, because I was like, this is in Canada and I already paid all this money to go. Like, I'm gonna go, but I can't play anything. So I went, and I'm really glad that I did. So I had a lot of mentorship there that kind of, and it transferred to Chicago. I actually found a teacher here that helped me through a lot of stuff. So I was able to kind of get back together in like a few months, but it's still kind of not right. I've got a lot of bonding on the bottom part of my tooth. So even just like last week I went to the dentist, and he fixed the bonding because it had like kind of worn away, and it chipped off, and I had to go back again. So it's still just one of those things that's kind of, I can play I learned a lot of things through the process, but it's still like not right.
Thanks, Monica. I think when I look back at the video, I'm going to see collective cringes across the panelists as we were like, people were covering their faces. Yeah. Oh, all right. Ryan, you're up next.
Hey, I'm Ryan Adamson's also a trumpet player in Chicago. There's just a bunch of us. But yeah, I have a few. I'm part of the Melvin Jones doesn't pick good brass playing hobbies when I was younger. So I was a hockey player. And actually, if you see the gap there, when I was younger, I took a hockey stick right there. So it was actually a friend of mine, the stick broke off right at the top. So most of the hockey stick went flying. He said, "Heads up." I didn't hear him. So I said, "What?" and turned into it. But that actually saved me, because I said, "What?" and I got my lip out of the way. So that's why my lip is okay. But yeah, so the bicuspid was sheared off. And then my front 2 teeth broke my palate in 3 places. So don't recommend that, pro tip. But yeah, so then had to get that fixed, obviously. And then relearned how to play for a couple of years, then got braces to kind of shift everything into the right place, relearned how to play again. Actually did 2 years of DCI with that, then got the braces off and relearned how to play again. So the good news is I was young, so I just kind of didn't know any better. But with that, it was nice because, it's like that was kind of as I was learning to play and as I was getting teachers and getting different advice through that. And for me, I'm kind of a bright side kind of guy. So I was like, well, it's made me a much better teacher, because now everybody's like, "Oh, I'm having this show." I'm like, "Oh, I've had that. Don't worry." So those are old hat. It's fine. I didn't even think of it. I actually have 3 small hernias right now, which when my doctor first told me, he's like, "Do you know you have 3 hernias?" It was like, at first I panicked and freaked out. And he's like, "They're small. I wouldn't tell you to do anything different." And so it was like, boy, because I played a gig that night and it was like the most efficient I've ever played in my life. I was like, "Don't move." He can play. But he even said I did some like breathing exercises with him in the office. He's like, "No, you're good." He's like, "Keep an eye on it and monitor him." So it's also consult with your doctor depending on what it is. But it's fine. I didn't even think of the hernias until you guys brought it up. But and then the other big one for me is I'm actually a clinic depressive. I've been self-managed and okay for several years now, even through this. So, but no, in undergrad, actually had a fairly significant breakdown. Ended up medicated for a couple of years in therapy for a couple of years. They all blend together after a while. And then ended up, even with that, ended up on the wrong medication. So was having an anxiety reaction to the medication for 3 years, but because I'm just kind of captain, like, we'll make it work. I was like, this is better though. So my bear is chasing me alarm was going off for no reason for like 3 years. And then had some issues right before grad school. And so they upped the dosage, which then was enough to make me disassociate. So I ended up having to commit myself and then switch medications, which, switching medications is a bonus. Highly recommended if it's not going well. And then went through all that and then moved to Chicago and started grad school. So it's one of those very different kinds of recoveries and different things. But that was part of why I wanted to hop on here when Mary mentioned it, just because it was like, even just those two different things are so different and yet the same, that I thought it was worthwhile. So
Yeah, when Ryan, agreed to do this, I wasn't even thinking that, but like, yeah, if you have an issue with depression or something, and you add that into a mental game that is being a professional musician, I didn't even think of that as something that would filter into this, but totally is. So thank you, Ryan, for joining in with us. Let's move on to Jay Jennings.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Jay Jennings here from Los Angeles, and I play the trumpet. This is really inspiring, hearing everybody's stories. Also, a little terrifying because I'm like, has that happened to me? I don't know. Wait, I felt something weird yesterday. I don't know. But no, it's really great hearing everybody's stories. And Carl, you reminded me of my wisdom teeth thing. I wasn't even going to talk about my wisdom teeth, but in November of 2019, I had my bottom 2 wisdom teeth removed, because before that there was an abscess on my bottom right tooth while I was on the road. I was, it was bad. It looked like somebody gave me a left hook, and a good one. My face was big, and I was playing an hour-and-a-half show. It was terrible. So then I went to the dentist. He was like, "Yeah, those got to come out." So that was painful and all that. And I did the recovery. That was the first time that I had to recover from a surgery since I was about 15 years old. So really, as a professional trumpet player, the only time. And I took some time off the horn, but I think I only took about 2 weeks off the horn with my wisdom teeth. The following year, about the same time, I had a hernia surgery. That was this past October. And I took 6 weeks off the horn for that. And I got the mesh. Recommend it. It's going well. Recovery was definitely the worst part. We were having a discussion about it here in the panelist chat. But yeah, I mean, the hernia, like, I didn't even have any pain really with the hernia. I was getting out of the shower and I saw this, what looked like a bulge, kind of in my left groin. And I was like, and it freaked me out. So I went to the doctor, and he was like, "Yeah, you got a hernia. If you weren't a professional trumpet player, I would say that you don't need this surgery. But given your occupation and you putting stress in your abdominal region daily for multiple hours a day, you're going to need this surgery, and you're going to have to lay off the horn." And that was 6 weeks off the horn, was the longest I've taken off the horn since I started playing. And it was a whole new world when I picked it up again and started from scratch. I'm excited because of all of the stuff that I found myself kind of correcting, and all the bad habits that I developed over the years of touring and just never warming up properly. And you when you take time off like that, it's a big reset. And I'm excited, actually. I actually had the opportunity to play a show this past year, which not a lot of people did. And it was an hour-and-a-half show, and this was like, I don't know, 3 weeks ago, and I was I was looking forward to it, but I was a little scared because I hadn't done that in a year. That was a little unfamiliar. And, the surgery, I didn't know how my endurance was going to be. And I got tired, but I think it was natural because I hadn't done it in a year. But, all that said, it's just, for me, it was about really slowing down, taking it slow, and going way back to the beginning fundamentals. And I'm still there. Like I've kind of developed a fondness for the fundamental routines, the lip slurs, the tonguing exercises, which I never had before. And I can't believe I'm saying that because I hated them for so long. And it's just because I was doing them wrong. So there was a lot to be learned. I'm still learning. I will continue to learn as a trumpet player and never win. But yeah, it's great to be here. Looking forward to hearing everybody else's stuff.
Thanks, Jay. And Aaron, you're last but not least.
Hey, everybody. How are you? I hope that you are staying warm. It was a high of 83 here in Miami, Florida today. It's 77 outside. I'm looking at some nice palm trees out my window, but I won't.
I wasn't going to say anything, Aaron. I wasn't going to say anything about the weather.
Sorry. Just after, Tom, my buddy Tom's giving me the thumbs down. We text avidly every day about our weather issues, and our tuba issues. So anyways, for those who maybe don't know me, I'm the professor of tuba and euphonium at the Frost School of Music at the University of Miami. Live in Sarasota, Florida, where I play with the Sarasota Orchestra, principal tuba there, and in the summertime at the Eastern Music Festival up in Greensboro, North Carolina. So we hit this COVID period, right? I think I played Bartok Concerto for Orchestra with I can't remember who the conductor was. Anyways, we played our Thursday night show, and then the pandemic hit and they shut everything down. And it kind of put all of us into a tailspin, didn't it? Like with that sudden amount of time off and wondering what this period of time was going to bring. And I'm kind of a project type of a person and kind of a perfectionist, and want to make sure my playing is at its absolute top form. And I've always had, my teeth kind of always rolled to the right. My mouthpieces always sat to the right on my face. And I'm able to play at a high level, but certain things in my playing always bugged me, that I knew that if I just had a flat set of teeth and I could get that mouthpiece over to the middle, that things would, be a little bit easier, perhaps in the mid register and low register, and, give me a little more stability and a flatter grill to work with, and not have to possibly get rid of like an embouchure shift that I had because I began as a euphonium player. So maybe just a few habits that I had from going from a small mouthpiece to a big mouthpiece. So that's just me being super, super picky. So I obviously got bored during this COVID period. And I remember talking to my good friend, Tom. He told me I was crazy. Tom Mccaslin, talking to you, buddy. He told me I was crazy for doing this, but I had always wanted to do Invisalign. So I ordered up the sets and got the whole thing going. And it was a 20-week program. I began right at the middle of August, maybe beginning of August, this 20-week Invisalign program, just to shift, my, teeth straighter and kind of push them back and round them out and get everything perfect. Went over with, the dentist how thought I wanted my mouth to look, and open it up wider. And I thought, man, this is a great time to do this. We're not forecasted to play at all in the fall. So I began this journey, and if you know anything about Invisalign, you have to wear them for 22 hours a day. Okay. And you're allowed to have them off for 2 hours a day, of which, I like to eat. I mean, you can look at me, I'm a tuba player, like to eat good food. And, so that takes time. And then the other amount of time, you should probably do your warm-up routine. And I'll tell you, your teeth shift drastically every week. So I would switch a set on Wednesday, and, Wednesday hurt, Thursday really hurt, Friday, the pain was like starting to go away. And then you would play with this new set of teeth. I was playing like a half an hour to an hour a day, basically was all I had. So I was really mapping out my time to try to keep up with the rapid pace that my mouth was shifting. And I noticed huge improvements right away. that being said, I'm also kind of a daredevil and out on jet skis out in the ocean, and I happened to flip one and had kind of a mild concussion, and I think I kind of tweaked my back in the process. Fast forward a few weeks, my wife sent me on a trip to go pick up a pretty heavy mattress and bed frame, and being the He-Man, tuba players don't back away from a challenge at all. I moved it and I kind of tweaked my back. Well, then I came to teach like third week of classes in the fall, and I set my 6/4 tuba down on the floor and bent to the left while I did it. Well, I couldn't come back up, and I felt everything like pop in my back. And I mean, I was bent, crooked over, couldn't even stand up straight. Went back, had an MRI, x-rays done, and my whole spine was tilted to the left hard like that. And I severely herniated the L3, L4, L4, L5, L5, S1 in my back. So I had that going on along with the Invisalign. Suddenly I wasn't allowed to pick up the tuba for about 4 to 5 weeks. Like, don't touch it, don't lift anything over 5 pounds, so trying to keep up with, my teeth program that was going on that I'd gotten myself into, not being able to play the tuba. So I had to take, 5 or 6 weeks off of the instrument. Came back, that had its own challenges. I'd highly recommend, if anybody knows what the U trainer is, it's an embouchure training device that really saved me, and kept my embouchure in good form while I was going through that. Got done with my Invisalign program first week of December, and then caught COVID 2 weeks later, and went through about a 3-week bout of that, and came out of that okay, and finally just really getting back to playing the tuba and enjoying doing so for more than an hour a day just the last few weeks here. So but yeah, that's my story in a nutshell. Just kind of recent semi-disasters. So
My goodness. And you think that musicians, it's like a safer profession, but not after tonight will you ever think that. I don't know if I introduced myself at the beginning. My name is Mary Galimi. I work for DENIS WICK North America. I didn't think of anything that too chaotic happened in my musician life. I'm a trumpet player, but it was, all of your stories were making me think. I had a baby 3 years ago. There's a couple of women in this panelist group, or in the panelists and the attendees. But having a child or carrying a child while you're trying to play trumpet, or trying to play brass instrument, it's interesting because the injury doesn't happen immediately. It just slowly grows inside of you and removes more and more space from your lungs. So breathing, everything gets a little more difficult. The climax of my performance career while pregnant was playing principal trumpet for Pines of Rome, and there wasn't really an off stage. So right before the solo, I had to weave through the trumpet section, through the percussion section, and get to the back, and then go through a small little corridor to get down behind some curtains. And I think by that point, I had gotten so used, I had done things, I had been slowly teaching myself to do things in more and more efficient ways. But yes, the whole process of having something growing inside of you and taking up all the room to breathe is actually a very learning and experience.
I won't tell Alfred you called him an injury.
Yeah. Well, and then the aftermath of playing that solo, by that point, he knew that the solo was going to be beautiful, but he knew the last movement came right after the solo. Like, he got very, very familiar with that symphony. He gets so angry because that whole last movement is, sitting on, higher part of your register, lots of stomach constriction. And so those little feet would start kicking back at me while I was trying to play. That there's nothing you can do about. But the breathing thing, as you guys are talking about COVID, like, you have to I'm guessing this is what you guys are going through. You kind of have to relearn how to breathe, because you can't breathe like your body wants to reactively breathe. It's completely different. But as we jump into everybody's discussion here, something that we brought up in the chat before this started was, when you're sick or when you're in the middle of dealing with something, you don't want to feel like you're complaining or whatever. There's a feeling like you can't talk about it. So did any of you go through that, where you just wanted to keep everything hidden and keep everything and what was that result for you?
If I could jump in, So I distinctly remember, I was this summer when my dystonia hit. I had to cancel a bunch of work, and I kind of just gave BS under the table. I had something come up, blah blah, whatever kind of excuse to the personnel manager. I didn't want to tell him I couldn't play my horn. I want him to still hire me. And I was kind of between schools at the time, and so I was supposed to go to a summer festival that I ended up backing out of. And I kind of put something vague on Facebook about that, and a good friend of mine texted me and said, "Hey man, don't put that out there. You don't want people to know you're having issues. You want people to still hire you." So I'm like, okay, so that's just reinforcing that mentality that I was already automatically putting on myself. That, and it's nothing against him. It's how we're all conditioned to function in this business to some degree. But it was almost a negative validation that thought process I was having was correct to some degree.
I think kind of along the same lines. When I got COVID was in January. I was sick for the entire month of January, but at the time we didn't know to call it COVID, or at least my doctor didn't, and I didn't realize that was what I was suffering from. But for the entire month, it was terrible. It was coughing up blood every night, but I still had a lot of gigs. I still had a lot of rehearsals. I still had recording sessions going on, and it was at the end of January when I literally went for an entire month with this before I finally decided maybe I should, call my doctor back and let him know the stuff he told me at the beginning of the month is not working. And so the irony of it all is that I had to perform for a trumpet festival that was going on at Kennesaw State. And I was there with Jose, with it was a lot of it's a lot of really big Don cornet. It was a lot of really big like trumpet figures. And here I am giving like a jazz concert, and it's like, well, there's no pressure. It's just a room, auditorium full of other trumpet players. But after the performance, I was literally back in the dressing room, like coughing up blood and then coming out and taking like selfies with people. And I'm thinking to myself, man, I think I got everybody there sick. But on the other hand, because we didn't know what to call it, I tried to just play through it as if it was anything else. And I don't know, like there's still certain things that are unknown about long-term effects from COVID exposure. The one thing that I do know is that since then, I can speak on it now that I've recovered, but I can 100% understand anyone, and this is before everything shut down for COVID. I can 100% understand anyone feeling a need to kind of keep that to themselves, but I kind of feel like you can do a lot more long-term damage if at the very least you don't address whatever it is that's wrong. If you want to keep it a secret, I get it, and I've done it. I don't know that it was a good idea, but in the end, if you don't at the very least do something about it, I was scared to even go to the doctor for the sake of losing the work. And I worked through it. After I came out on the other side of it, we continued to work, and I was filming a show, Sunday Best, here in Atlanta, Georgia, during the month of March. And that's when everything shut down after the very first week, ironically over a COVID scare on set. And so that's when it really hit home. It's like, no, this could have been so much worse, because I don't know if it was the prolonged time of not addressing it or if it was the disease itself. But now I do have a lot of long-term effects that, that I wish I had just taken. I bit the bullet initially, because now it feels like I bite the bullet every time I pick up the horn. So I would advise people, whatever issues you have, do take them seriously enough, at least for the sake of your own career.
Yeah, I have. Go ahead, Ryan.
No, you go first.
I was just gonna tag along with that on the COVID train. It's so because of COVID, the school I was teaching at, they completely dumped their music program, and so I don't have like the normal teaching gig that I'm used to having this year, and so I had to find other means of income, and I'm a commercially rated pilot. And so I fly small airplanes, sometimes single pilot, sometimes multi-crew operated, for this really small company just down the street from me. And I was really afraid to publicly put out, on social media or whatever, that, oh yeah, guys, I'm down and out because I got COVID. I didn't tell my family initially. I told Mary, I told my band leader, and I told my chief pilot. And those were the only people that knew. And then I was out. And because I was just afraid. I was like, oh gosh, what if what if someone found out and they told their other buddy and I didn't get hired for a gig, or I show up to the airport one day and maybe one of the guys that I'm supposed to crew with is like, oh, well, I don't want to be with him because in the cockpit we can't wear masks because then we can't be heard on the radio. So the FAA says no masks for crew. And so it's a whole thing. And, it's, yeah, I get that. And it's hard to because you want to say something and you want to reach out, but at the same time, you don't want to, possibly damage your livelihood.
Yeah, for me, the physical ones are pretty straightforward. Like, partly I was younger, so I mean, like, any gigging I was doing was pretty low level, and it was like you can play or not, you don't have teeth, it's what it is. So, but the depression stuff is very different. When I started, partly I just literally didn't know what it was. I just knew like my brain's not working, and it took a year to actually diagnose me. But I was going through therapy, I was doing different things, trying stuff out. I'm kind of lucky in the sense that I just sort of didn't know any better. So I just kept going to school and doing things and telling people, I'm like, yeah, I'm struggling with this. And I went to my teachers and I had a close relationship with both my, private teachers. And they both were like, all right, just tell us what you can and can't do. And there were better and worse days, and, both depression and just working with them. But the biggest thing is over time, it was like, it's one of those, everybody talks about the stigma of bringing it up. For me, like when I had the major episode and ended up having to hospitalize myself, that was actually when I was supposed to start grad school. And so I had to call DePaul, who I haven't even been there yet, and say like, hey man, I'm not coming. I want to come, but not yet because of this. And I was just honest. I was like, here's the thing. Here's what's going on. I don't feel comfortable moving to another state yet. And this is what's going on. I can send you doctor's notes if you want or whatever else. And, credit to them both, Lark and Matt were like, nah, man, let us know when you're good and we'll hold your scholarship when you get here. And so, first of all, having that and that kind of support was great. But they even said, they're like, no, because you're honest, you didn't hem around it. We're like, okay, well, this is someone, he's going to tell us what's going to happen and go through that. And then since then, it's like I said, I manage it at this point. It's been good. But there's days, it's not something that's ever overtly gone, and that's just the reality of the situation, at least for me personally. And so it's something, being honest and picking those days and going like, today is just not going to work. It's just not going to happen, and giving yourself permission to do that. And again, like, Evan said, like, there's always a temptation. Like, do I tell the gig it's for this? Do I not? I can't remember the last time I had to call off a gig or something, but there's stuff like, for writing, there's times where I'll just call a client and be like, do you need this today? I was like, I will get it to you today if you need it. But boy, if you can get it 2 days from now, it'll be a lot better, and I'll be about 1,000% less crazy, and just having those conversations are very difficult. But, I've always found being honest seems scarier. And especially like, for me, it's literally part of the thing is you catastrophize. You start saying like, what if this happens? What if this is what they say? And you assume the worst is going to happen. And I had to at least train myself to go like, I have to assume the best is going to happen, and I have to reinforce it in myself and reinforce that that's going to thing. And then you need to step off the cliff and try it and do it and force yourself to do that moment and be honest. And when you are, you find out. And for me, it just comes down to, at the end of the day, for those things, I'm like, I would rather be in the gig that is going to accept and support me for what I am and what I'm doing the best I can when I'm being honest. And if a gig is not willing to work with me when I'm honest, then I shouldn't be in that gig. And I mean that in both ways. Both, I don't want to work with them, and also like, I'm not the person they want, and that's okay. And let them get the person that's going to be better for that, and I'll go do something else. So
one of my favorite Ryanisms, which I've heard about as long as I've known Ryan, is what's the best that could happen? Because it's our first instinct to say, oh God, what's the worst that can happen? Might as well try it. In both instances, you're encouraging yourself to go forward, but in one, you're kind of just setting yourself up for disappointment. And one, it's a much more, what's the best that can happen? And you can just start focusing on all the best things that can happen.
Well, in full credit, that's actually a Tom Matta-ism, because
Okay.
Tom was my advisor in my master's, and it was Joe Clark and I, or trumpet players, and we would always go, what's the worst that could happen? And just like, you know, we were doing it flippantly, like meaning honestly the same thing. And Tom got so sick of hearing it in like the first like 3 weeks of school. He's like, what's the best that could happen? Come on, be more. I just started doing it. So then that became our bit. So that's, yeah. Anyway.
Well, you and Ryan and a lot of things that I've heard from my previous question, they kind of revolve around expectations that you set for yourself, you know, in terms of, you know, you're able to talk to other people because you've set an expectation for how to move forward. So let's kind of move on to that part of the discussion. When you've been diagnosed with a sickness, or the injury has happened, or you've got a plan for the hernia surgery, how do you set expectations for a situation you've potentially or most likely never been in before? And we're not talking about the rehab yet. We're talking about what do you do when you're sick? There was a question about how to, from our attendees, what's the best way to conquer overuse syndrome? And, you know, you don't necessarily need to, in my opinion, you don't need to be extremely busy to have overuse syndrome. You could have just been, you know, playing in the wrong way for too long, but, you know, in your mind, now you're in the middle of this injury or this overuse syndrome, and you've got to break out of it. And how do you do that? I mean, so step one, yes, talk to people, but what are how else do you get in the right mindset to get yourself through that sickness period where you need to plan for something you haven't really experienced before?
Not to be the one constantly talking, but for me, it kind of comes down to forgiving yourself, you know, and I mean that in both senses, like both the psychological one is the one where I think of it, but for me physically too, it's like, if your face isn't working, your face isn't working. That's not your fault. You didn't tell your face not to work, right? And it's just sort of getting to that point and allowing yourself permission to sound like you sound and get better and do the things you need to. And like even the overuse question, that's something teaching drum corps, that's a thing all the time. Overuse injuries, whether it's literally your body or just playing, we're like, no, take the horn off your face. You know, that's the best way, you know, and sometimes you can't, like you said, sometimes you got a gig and, you know, you need to put some Cheerios on the table. So you got to get through it. But in between, if you're an overuse injury, by definition, if that's what it is, means that you need to take the time off and give yourself the time to recover. And if you're not building in that recovery time, then that's its own discussion, you know, and this is different for different people, and what is actually overuse or not is another thing. And that's where I know something we were talking about before we came in here is like finding the right help is so important. And like, I know there's a couple of guys I've talked to on things, like Brad Good has gone through a bunch of things, trumpet player out in Colorado. He's phenomenal with things like that. And actually Chip Krotz went through a dystonia thing, and he actually videoed like every day for like his journey. It's like, this is what it's like today, and like has like the SAG and everything. And it was like, I remember just being like flabbergasted, because it's like, yeah, I mean, I'm fairly personally strong and do all this stuff, but I can't imagine putting myself out there that way and being like, hey, this is what my playing is like today. I sound like a middle schooler and I can't feel half my face, but I'm going to do this because now I'll see what it's like next week, and I'll see what for someone else's journey. So things like that and finding those people. But I think, Carl, you were the one who was talking about like finding the right person. Is that correct?
Yeah. And yeah, to echo what everyone else is so very pragmatically and saying, like, it's really about humbling yourself. Like, it's not your fault. If you need help, you gotta ask for it. That was a real lesson for me, because so to put it in context, I had all 4 wisdom teeth come out. Like I said, this is like a full 2 years after I was having real problems, real pain, you know, waking me up in the middle of the night. Finally, it was like, okay, well, I guess I got to get the teeth out. I'm stubborn, or maybe not smart. I don't know. I thought I could just leave them in and my body would adjust, but I took 2 weeks off, and then I went on tour for the next 3 months. And it was the most horrible time of my life. And every day was kind of like, this is screaming at me, you need to stop. But going back to expectations, my expectation of myself was that somehow I would kind of like chin up and make it work and trust the air and do that. I didn't want to be the guy who would cancel all of these things for my group when we were on tour, and kind of be like at fault for ruining the entire spring season. So I thought I could get away with it. Turns out I couldn't. And every subsequent week that I added made it just exponentially worse. So I think like, yeah, having the expectation like, okay, you can't control everything, so know when to say stop and know when to pull the plug. And like you were saying, like overuse, like, okay, so stop using it. Put the horn down, you know? What's the worst that's going to happen from that? What's the best that's going to happen from that? Yeah, that was really humbling because that's a mistake I can't necessarily go back and fix. The discs are slipped. You can't really do surgery for that for a brass player. So now it's something that is something I manage rather than something that can be fixed. So that all has been very humbling. Kind of starting back, and also like you were mentioning earlier, anytime you take time off the horn and you come back to it, it's also an opportunity to rebuild in a better way and kind of start back from the very basics, and accepting whatever sound's coming out the bell, that's the sound, you know, and go from there.
I'd
like to.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to jump on and kind of echo that, and also what Ryan was saying. One about kind of making sure that you were, you know, that you can find the right help. You know, that you can find the, you know, there are so many, you know, experts out there, and so many doctors that work specifically with musicians. And you know, if you reach out to your teachers, and they're going to be able to hook you up with someone. They're going to say, oh, XYZ, they're the person that everyone with the CSO goes to. They're the person everyone in the Cleveland Orchestra, or they're the person that so-and-so who had a similar problem worked with. Because a lot of musicians end up going into medicine, and then they become specialists. But then that same thing, it's like, you know, what Carl was saying, kind of going on the. So for me, when I injured my throat, it was like, it was a repetitive issue. It wasn't something that like broke that needed to heal. It was like too much tension and stress, and I needed to unlearn and manage it. And if I do things in the same way, I'm going to end up with the same problem all over again. And you know, similarly with having hernias, which were, no one can specifically, like, I mean, unless it happens when you're exerting yourself, you know, you don't know always when it happens. You know, you could be like Ryan, and the doctor will be like, hey, you've got 3 hernias. You know, it can just happen, and you don't realize it. But I think for me, like, both times I noticed when it happened, and it was because I was playing something and I was just trying too hard. And those were like great lessons, because that's, you know, that's like teaching. That taught me, it's like, okay, don't do that again. Like, that's not necessarily, the results were good, but like, it's not sustainable. It's not long, you know, it's not something that there's a better way to do it. And that's what, you know, all these injuries have taught me, is that there's a better way to do it. There is an easier way to do it. And even having like then had the surgery and you're repaired and they put the mesh in, and it's technically stronger than your body was to begin with, and it's stronger than your body ever could have been. It's still like in your brain, and you're like worried about it for months, you know, for a year, for a very long time. It's like, oh, is that going to happen again? It's like, because this, you know, having a hernia, you may not notice. It's, for a lot of people, it's painless. It's not so bad. Getting that surgery done is the week right after is miserable. You can like, you barely sit up from lying on the couch. It's like such bad pain. It's really miserable to have a piece of mesh put inside you, and they have little tacks, and they're attaching it. And anyway,
You're selling it, baby. You're selling it.
Yeah, it's no, but anyone who's been through it knows. It's like, this is really not something that I want to happen again. And every time, you know, getting through that process, then after I've had my days and I've had my weeks off the horn, I approach the horn like hypersensitive of everything that I'm doing, like my whole body. I'm aware of my posture. I'm aware of like when I'm tensing up anywhere. And it's really kind of like helped me focus and really make sure that I'm coming back to everything with with as good habits as I possibly can. So I guess like for me, that's always like the silver lining of any injury that I've had. At least all the ones that I've had, I've been able to kind of come back from and be a stronger player afterward.
Yeah, it's kind of focusing the energy. Like you definitely turn into WebMD for a minute. You know, it's
Well,
like sniffles, probably COVID, you know,
Yeah.
but then like by the same token, if you focus that energy on yourself and go, am I doing good habits? And then you can reinforce it. You know?
Yeah. And that reminds me actually something I was going to say way earlier when you were talking. It's like the number one thing that I think I would advise everyone not to do is start Googling. Like, don't start looking up your symptoms and like hypothesizing like what your problem is, because you need a doctor to tell you. Otherwise, you're just going to be
unless you're Googling for a specialist, which you
yeah.
can do as soon as possible.
Yeah, otherwise your brain is just going to start like going into all of the worst places. And you'll be really surprised once you talk to a doctor or once you talk with some of your, and then once you find out what's wrong, talk with your mentors, with your teachers, because odds are that some of them have experienced something similar, and that's going to be very reassuring to you.
Yeah, we were talking about the whole idea of, like I can't tell anybody because of, I mean, just kind of looking around the screen, like I know most of you guys, and like these are amazing players at the top of their game, and they've all dealt with like incredibly challenging things. So it's real important to know that if you're going through something, if you're dealing with a hernia, or you're going through COVID, or any of the things that you could possibly be going through, that someone else is going through it also, or has gone through it. And one of the great things about music is it's such a small world, and I feel I've always found that the people who are really good musicians are always very fine people, and they're always willing to help. So if you're going through those problems, don't be afraid to say something or ask for help. I mean, luckily I'm one of those people that I'm very type A and very controlling, and I have very specific goals, and I set lists, and I have very specific ways I do things. So as soon as something happened, like when I noticed that weird feeling in the, it felt like gas bubbles or something like that when I was playing, and then it just got worse and worse. I got terrified. So the first thing I did was call my doctor. I had, I wasn't even going to talk about it because it didn't even occur to me. But back in 2014, I was getting ready to record an album with my trio, and it was all Baroque duet stuff. So it was all piccolo trumpet, and I was just doing lots and lots of piccolo. And then one day I couldn't make a sound on the piccolo. Like I had just stressed myself out so much I could not make a sound. It sounded great on B flat, on my C, no problem. Flugelhorn, cornet, piece of cake. Pick up a piccolo trumpet and everything just stopped. That giving yourself time, like it's okay. Like I rescheduled the recording session. I still have a career. It's fine. Take time. Don't rush through these things. Take the time to heal and make sure that you're ready to do what comes next.
One thing that came to mind, actually, as Ryan was talking, and again when Josh was talking, and now when Chris is talking, something that an old teacher told me at least 15 years ago at this point. Start with what you can do. And I try to come at the horn with that approach every day, especially post dystonia, because once I started working with Jan Kagarais, I played a middle F for 2 weeks. That was it. The summer before, I had spent 2 weeks playing with the Cleveland Orchestra, and now I'm playing a middle F. That's all I'm allowed to do. So I had to fully embrace that mindset of approaching each day with a fresh slate, starting with what I can do and going from there, using that as a starting point, not by any means as a limitation, just as a starting point. And it for me, that just helped remove a lot of the negative judgment that can come with recovering from any kind of injury. But that was unique to specific to my case in the circumstances that it came up in.
There was one other angle of expectations that I wanted to kind of hit on before we move on to the rebuild, but I think we all have had, you all have provided great advice, because as soon as we see a problem, you know, we're players, we're teachers, we think of the solution. So when we see our colleagues and the people that we respect around us, if something happens to them, you want to provide your best to them to help them get better as best as they can. But if you're going through the injury or the sickness yourself, there are points where you just don't want advice. You don't want any more solutions from people. You know that there will be it's not that you're not being optimistic, but you know there's a solution there, but you're just exhausted from the solutioning. And so in terms of putting expectations for yourself, did any of you, and maybe I'll open this up to Tom and Monica, I haven't heard from you guys in a second. Did you leave expectations to allow yourself time to just deal with the fact that this sucks right now? Like, solutions aside, yes, we will be strong, we will conquer, but like, did you leave yourself time to just feel crummy about it? Because I think that's a natural part of getting through something too. You can't just ignore the fact that you wish something different was happening right now.
Yeah, I'll chime in and just say that unfortunately, at some point in all of our lives, life as a general sense takes over. And so you really, for me, I couldn't have expectations about anything when I had no control over anything. I mean, really, what I was doing was fighting cancer. That was my job. That's what my family was involved with doing. The tuba and music and my job all became an afterthought, because none of that really had any place if I wasn't around. And so that was the priority in getting through that process. And anything that I could do on the tuba during that time was really for my own mental, pleasure. That if it was a good thing and I could spend some time, if I could hold up the tuba and I could make a sound, then great. And if it was just too much frustration, then it wasn't something that I allowed myself to get frustrated about, because it became very, very secondary to what the real important stuff was. So I just let it go until I knew that I was in a place that I could focus on getting back to having expectations, because I had some control, and that's when I was healthy. So I let myself get to the point where health, took over everything. And it wasn't until that was solved that I put the expectations that I used to have as a professional aspiring musician back on myself, because everything else was just too much mentally to get through. So, I think some people have already said that be kind to yourself. Let yourself go through this trauma, let yourself conquer it, and let yourself get back to your instrument when the time is right, and the expectations that you have change completely from what they were before. I just basically threw out everything I knew and about how I perceived of myself playing and sounding, and decided that I was going to start over when that time was going to begin, which was the recovery process. So yeah, I'm not a person that takes days off of playing the tuba. I had gone more than a decade with never taking a day off of playing. And I know that sounds insane, but even when I went to Jamaica with my wife for a big anniversary trip, I had a travel tuba, and I was playing lip slurs and long tones in the hotel room with a practice mute, DENIS WICK practice mute in. And my wife is a trombone player and is supportive of that. And the audition for my job in the Calgary Phil was 2 months after that vacation. So I guess it paid off, but that all just stopped, and I was just like, okay, this being a tuba player is not really any concern. So yeah, I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, I feel like this was when I truly kind of figured out, like, oh, you're a person first before you're a musician. This was like the moment for me where I'm like, oh yeah, you're not just a musician. Like, somebody's telling you that you can't play because you broke your face and you need it to heal first, you know, like you could do more damage here if you like try and make it, if you try and push it too fast, you know? So it's like, yeah, I mean, you have to switch your thinking a lot, you know, like, okay, what can you do? What you can do is rest, you know, and musicians like we want to be the best at everything, you know? So it's like, okay, I'm gonna be the best at resting. Okay, cool. Um, but yeah, I mean, and then as things started to heal for me personally, then I did want to push it, and I did overplay at one point, and because all I was getting in lessons was I had a super easy duet book, and my teacher was like, okay, play one line and then rest, play another line and then rest, and then if you get tired, stop. And I'm like, that's it, you know, because we're so used to doing so much more. And so it's like, yeah, it goes back to that, what can you do? You know, so I did a lot of listening, you know, and that kind of like saved my mental space a lot, you know, because it's like if I wasn't playing, I could be listening. And then when I did finally go back to the horn, I was like, wow. Because again, I hadn't taken a lot of time off my instrument. This was the first really considerable amount of time I had to take off the horn. And then when I went back to it, I was like, wow, I play with a lot of tension because all your muscles kind of revert back to what they were before you played your instrument essentially. And so I just kind of noticed, I'm like, oh wow, all of these things change. And yeah, I don't know. And then when you are recovering from an injury, it's like you constantly overanalyze everything. You're like, this doesn't feel like it used to feel, and this doesn't feel right, or and it's not that it's wrong, it's just really unfamiliar. So you kind of have to get out of like how you used to do things and how things used to feel. And it's like, this is what is normal for me now. And that's fine. And it's going to be what it's going to be. And you know, if even as COVID has taught us, you know, like we have to pivot because we're people and we have to make a living and we have to have time to spend with our families and with our, I don't know, just time to be people, you know? So I don't know. I feel like I'm doing a bad job of explaining this, but
Nope.
it's just
No,
it's a weird,
good.
spot on.
just like a weird mental space that it happens when you go through an injury, and it's a lot of learning in like a short amount of time mentally.
One thing with that it was a really important thing that I was super slow to catch on to is you don't have to talk about anything if you don't want to. Like you can turn your phone off. You know, like that was something when I was going through depression. I had lots of friends and they really cared about me, so they would check up. And so every time someone would check up, I felt obligated to give them a full, like checkup of this is how I'm doing, this is how I'm feeling, this is where everything's at. And then there's a point where I'm like, I'm answering 100 text messages a day, so I'm never getting away from it. Let alone taking time for myself. I'm like, no, I need to read a book and turn my phone off for 3 days and have that be okay. And that was just like a very important lesson that was not intuitive for me, at least. So
Yeah,
I think.
Go ahead, Tom.
I was just going to say that it really is painful to hear you guys talk about stigma and feeling like you're being judged for going through some kind of a trauma, because in the true reality is like every human being experiences trauma, and if you haven't, you just haven't yet. And I think that when we first experience it, we sort of think that we're this isolated case and everyone else is over here, and we don't want them to know that we're going through something. And what's really the case is there's all these people that haven't dealt with something, and then there's everyone else in the world that's trying to figure it out. And when you can free yourself from that, it really goes a long way to rediscovering who you are and being confident with your struggles. So, whoever those people are, screw them. And know that everybody else is dealing with the same stuff,
Yeah, I mean, just to sorry, I was just going to piggyback on exactly what Tom was just saying, mainly probably because we talk about it all the time, don't we, Tim? The problem is social media has done such a job of, whether you agree with the left or right side, we're in this cancel culture. And people are trying to cancel other musicians out that have problems. Like Tom said, you are bound to hit difficulty in your life. And if it hasn't hit you yet, it will hit you in some form, whether it's self-made or self-inflicted, or if it's something that comes upon you, and I cringe when I see people, feeling bad that they caught COVID, like they did something wrong. I mean, it's happening to millions of people around this world, and tons of people recover just fine, and people lose their life. I just lost a family member the other week with dealing with that. And I mean, there's sickness and there's death in this world, and there are illnesses, and like Tom was just saying, I mean, you are bound to have hardship in your life, and if we're talking about like playing wise, I remember talking with Tom, like I remember you said you knew you were going to go through chemo, and you were going to go through all of these life altering things, and your health was your number one priority. I remember Tom saying, I'm going to put this tuba away in a really good space. I remember like you like practiced and played like right up until, you put that thing away. And sometimes, I mean, we can control, the surgery or the, our outcome, and other times things happen to us. But I think if something's coming up, try to put the horn away in a good place, be in shape, if you're going to take some time off of the horn. And if you're coming back, like what a lot of people have said, learn to just do simple things well. I mean, learn how to, like Evan was saying, learn how to just play F, learn how to start the note, learn how to release the note, learn how to shape the note, learn how to sustain the note, learn how to crescendo, learn how to decrescendo, then go from F to F sharp, F to E natural, and spread the love around, the range of your instrument, and just do those simple things well on a daily basis, but man, I mean, it just pains me, to think that people feel ashamed for getting sick or for going through something. None of us should feel that way. And anybody watching this, should, I mean, shame on the rest of the world for coming down on people for going through something. That's when people should come around you and lift you up and ask how you're doing. I mean, what a nasty, I mean, if that's what the music business is, what a nasty culture to work in if we're going to cancel each other out because so-and-so got sick, or I heard they went through this, that, and the other. I mean, let your playing do the talking. You're not truly as bad as your worst experience that you've had in life. Your triumphs speak volumes to the type of person that you are, and we should all come out of it stronger, and we should have the support of one another. So sorry, I'll get off my soapbox now.
No, I think that's wonderful. All I was going to say is, we are, we as musicians, we all exist in this same community, and we all have the same goals, and we all, at some point or another, we are going to cross paths with each other. Evan and I, for example, go all the way back to Blue Lake Fine Arts Camp in Michigan for summer band camp, and this year, for example, I went through a really awful divorce. And there was a period where I was like, I didn't want to pick up the trombone. That was the last thing I wanted to do. I didn't want to bother with that. But I talked to Evan. He's like, you need to go play. You need to go pick up the trombone. And we are cheerleaders for each other, and having that support system and that community around you. And like what Aaron said, not being ashamed, but instead being like, hey, this is an issue. Let's go have a cup of coffee, if that was the thing. Or, just sending your buddy in Nashville a text message and being like, hey, what are you up to? Do you want to sit down and talk? Or, did you hear about this new trombone or whatever? Having that support system there to kind of cheer you on, I think is really important. And so find who those people are and keep them really, really close, because that'll really help you get through the darkest of it.
Yeah. Thanks.
Can I add something here also? Kind of going off of what Aaron was saying. I think it's actually probably the way that I like to kind of look at it is it's probably a safe bet to say that much of the music that we love the most, we probably wouldn't have if those musicians hadn't gone through something, probably something really rough. the the to be able to express, to be able to have something, an experience that you can share, you have to have gone through something, and that just makes everything kind of all that more authentic, from a musical standpoint. If you've gone through something and you can then use it in your musical outlet. I mean, how many pieces of music do we all love, whether they've got words or not, that were inspired by probably catastrophic events?
Although definitely do not, like if someone's depressed or something like that, don't be like, now you'll have something to write about. Just putting that one out there, oh my God, so many people did that to me. And I'm like, if one more person told me, like, I wasn't going to be in trouble, but they were. So just anyway.
It's been amazing hearing everything, like everything that I was about to like jump in and say, like everybody covered, which is great because I'm on the same page as all the panelists here. But I guess what I can offer is my experience this past calendar year, which has been strange for everyone. But I don't know, I knew, I saw the surgery coming this time, so like I thought it was important to kind of make a plan. And I'm not a very organized person in general. It was hard for me to make a plan. It's even hard for me, if I'm honest, to play the trumpet every day. I struggle with that. I want to. I try really hard. This year I've missed 2 days so far, so go me. But like that's hard for me. I was never the type of player who liked sitting down and playing trumpet exercises. I'm coming into a new light with them now, only because I took those 6 weeks off, I think. But what I was gonna say is this past calendar year of self-reflection for me, and I'm pretty positive a lot of people, has been just extremely profound. And like just my experiences getting married the day before the world shut down, literally, and then this summer with the riots here in LA, and my wife and I, like, I mean, I'll never forget it. But just so much I'm not going to say traumas because they didn't necessarily happen to me, but for me to acknowledge that I was not affected emotionally, and that I did not go through a form of depression would be not true. I definitely went through some depression this year for the first time in my life. So for whatever that's worth, like I thought it was important to reach out to some of my own friends during this time of weirdness that live alone. I know we know a lot of people, a lot of musicians that live by themselves and don't have people to talk to at all. So I thought that was important. And I think what I was trying to say is just we've all been through a lot this past year, and to acknowledge that. And somebody said it earlier that it's okay to feel crummy. I think Mary said that. And like, gosh, if somebody would have told me that, I mean, if I would have listened or just been aware of a sentence like that from a good friend, I think I could have like come to the conclusion that it is okay to feel bad, and we're not the only one. So I don't know. I don't want to like preach on mental health because I'm definitely a novice, but
well, to the point is we're all novices.
Yeah.
Kind of by
exactly.
definition, if it's trauma, by definition, it was the first time you went through it. Kind of.
Yeah, I guess so.
The second time doesn't make it less traumatic, but you at least know what's going on. I mean, like that's one thing for this year for me. I've at least kind of dealt with this, and I know my warning signs, but that doesn't make me not depressed.
Yeah, totally.
It's just makes me better equipped.
It was new to me to talk about it, and it was new to me to experience it. But I mean, we've all been through so much. It's hard to not. I'm glad I did, in a way. I'm glad I had that self-reflection and went through it and grieved about it and everything that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Just wanted to share that, I guess.
No, that's right. You know, sometimes what we've been talking about, there are not so subtle signs that we're going to go through something like breaking your face, but then a lot of what happens, like Chris was talking about, what Jay was talking about, are subtle things that slowly build up and build up and build up, and all of a sudden you just can't play because there's so many stressful things that have built up on you. I went through a period of that. I'd gotten bullied for I was at Interlochen Arts Academy for high school, so I was on my own, no parents. My junior year, I was getting bullied every single day from the second chair trumpet player in the orchestra, and I was playing first, and nobody cared or did anything about it. And I got so stressed out about it, I couldn't play anything out of the middle range staff for like the whole year. It was a whole year of Interlochen, and it wasn't until like the following school year that I could start playing again. But stress subtly builds up, depression subtly builds up, and then you got to build yourself out of it. So on the rebuild subject, because we're pretty running out of time quickly here. Oh, yep, Josh.
Can I just add something quick?
Yes,
Well,
yes,
and you
please.
may be touching on it, but it was just something that I haven't heard.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I've heard from anyone, but something that to me was helpful, and just to kind of put out there. If like me and Chris and Jay and whomever else has like been through a surgery with had a hernia or something, it's like listen to your doctors, like, for what they say for recovering.
Mhm.
And don't listen to all your friends who play trumpet, because like everyone is different. Everybody's body is different. And if someone's like, I played a gig after 4 days, it's like, okay, like that's you. Like that's not how my body healed. So like listen to your doctor. When I had my second hernia surgery, I brought my trumpet, my mouthpiece, to my 1 week meetup, or 2 week, whatever it was. And I think it was after 1 week, and because I was like optimistic, it was extremely small hernia. And I was like, can I demonstrate buzzing for you? Like, I don't think it's going to be very, very bad. And like, they tell you like after a week, your body has healed 90, whatever percent, right? And it takes a month until you're 100. So I brought my mouthpiece into the doctor's office, and I buzzed for him, and he's like, that's totally fine. Like, you can do that. It's not an issue at all. And that was a way for me to, not have to be completely off the horn for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. I was able to start incorporating it in, but it was me talking to my physician and getting that information from the person who actually did the surgery, who actually knew what was going on in my body. And that's who you want to be listening to, not your colleagues who went through something similar, because everybody's different.
And write down what they said, because a lot of time you can talk yourself into what you wanted the advice to be. And like all
Record
the
it.
friends, yeah, no, it's like, because like I love my friends. Some of my friends have terrible ideas, It's like, just talk to your doctor and write it down. Because it was like, I've had ones where I would go back to the advice a week later and be like, oh, I was telling myself this is not what they said. So that's where it's helpful.
Well, go ahead, Chris.
I was gonna say I did the exact same thing that Josh did. I think it was the 2 week checkup, whatever. I was just itching. I just wanted to do something, so I just brought my mouthpiece in and said, "Can I just show you what this is?" And that's okay. Please do that. And if your doctor says it's okay, do it. But don't rush it. Don't rush into it. Take your time. Wait until they say that it's okay. And then I guess we're kind of going on to the rebuilding bit. I guess I would say one of the best things that I did though during the time that I couldn't play was I had a lot of listening. That helped. Getting beautiful sound in my head was important. It kept me from being like really depressed about what was the fact that I couldn't play, because I could still hear this, and I knew that I could do that again. I was going to be making those sounds again. But one of the other things that was really important for me and helped me a lot on the other side of things was that I didn't stop teaching. I still did my after the first week off, I just took a week off just to heal, so that I could just be in a room, and I would just sit and listen to my students play. And teaching helped me a lot because you're using your ears, you're thinking, you're being a musician, you're doing all the things that is important to all of us. You're helping somebody else, which is also important. But then you're reminding yourself of all those good fundamental habits that you should be doing, so that when you come back to it, and as I gradually, after the doctor said I could, I started bringing the mouthpiece into the lessons. Now I could do some of those things with them. And while they were doing it, I was doing it too. And we were making sure that we were doing all the right things and the time to do that. And again, letting yourself have that time was important. I mean, my first gig after was way too soon, and I remember it was with Alliance Brass. We were doing a school show, and I was sweating. It was just miserable experience. And then I auditioned for grad school like 2 days after that, which was another just horrible idea. Because I put too much pressure on myself usually, but luckily then I was like, okay, these were bad ideas, and then I kind of slowed down and went back to the basics, and just a lot of buzzing, a lot of long tones, a lot of just as balance was huge. I don't know, like this was something that I didn't really figure out until I went through the surgery and recovery. But like just the simple difference of when you're standing, if you stand with your like the weight on kind of on the balls of your feet, you're just kind of like in that, like you're about to take a step. The quality of breath is so much more relaxed than when you're kind of back on your heels, and how much tension there is in something like that. And it just being able to again find where all all those points of tension were, and to release those points of tension, and to find an easier way to do things. I was just talking with Ronald Rum the other day, and he's like, easier is better. If you can find an easy way to do it, that's the way to do it. Yes, and that's definitely goes for this.
Can I jump in one more second? So one more thing, also, just to kind of put this out there as well. In the same vein of listening to your doctor, for me, a big part of recovery from having surgery is mental. It's like up here, because you're afraid that like something is gonna happen again, especially if you've had 2 hernias. Then it's you're always worried. But listening to them and then trusting them when they say, oh, like you can play again, like you're okay, because you can then also just create new problems if you're holding tension in places that you're not used to holding tension, because you're afraid of putting that support on your abdomen. Then suddenly you start like tensing up in your neck, or you start tensing up somewhere else. Trust that when they say that you're fixed and you're healed, maybe you're going to be in discomfort. Then that's natural and fine. Like you're going to heal afterward. But to me, the mental aspect was a far longer recovery process than that physical aspect. And like until I could really kind of let go, allow myself to feel like it was going to be okay. So to kind of put that. Hey, Chris, so real quick question. You said you played sooner than you should have. How soon was that?
It was a little over a month from the surgery. But I guess it wasn't that I played sooner than I should have, is that I played full out sooner than I played a show sooner than I should have. I didn't give myself the chance to really get back into shape, and I know that I was not playing efficiently, and I was definitely not playing my best on either the quintet show or at that doctoral audition, which I did not end up going to Northwestern because of that. But but again, that's fine. It was then realizing that I didn't give myself the time to do that, and then giving myself the time to get back.
So I think I wanted to speak on this on the idea of rebuilding as well. When I mentioned earlier, kind of in passing, but when I was I guess when the attack happened during my freshman year, and that kind of changed the way I was playing, there was no mercy whatsoever from any of the people in marching band at the time. In fact, my section leader, I'll never forget. I came in, my half of my lip was swollen up, black eye, side of my head was kind of swollen. And I sat next to him, and he basically just looked over at me and said, shouldn't have been doing whatever got your butt kicked, and just left it at that. And we were still, like in the middle of marching band season at the time. And so I developed, like I said, a lot of bad habits. And before then, I was pretty much just playing on instinct anyway, because as teenagers, no real guidance. I was just able to do certain things without knowing how or how I should do those things in the first place. So I went through my entire college career, a successful, time, a really successful playing career, a lot of advancements, but still doing a lot of the wrong things. And mostly because, as stated before, I never really took the time to figure out what I was supposed to be doing before the injury, let alone after the injuries. And so by the time I got to graduate school, I ended up studying with William Fielder, the late great, fantastic trumpet impresario. And when I got there, it was funny. I think it might have been Monica or someone else that mentioned playing just an F, or someone mentioned just playing an F for forever. So the funny thing about studying with Prof, the year I got there was the same year that Sean Jones had gotten there, and the same year that Lee Hogans had gotten there, and we were all roommates. And we basically would come back to our home and ask each other, "Hey, so what'd you do in your lesson today?" Play concert F. What'd you do? Play concert F. He had every single one of us playing nothing but concert F for an entire year of study, the entire first year of our graduate study. And mind you, we were still going off having to play in the ensembles, a little tension there, having to play professionally at the same time. But when it came time for lessons, he would sit there and in the most Mr. Miyagi type fashion, in the most unexplained, toot, 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 no, that's it, put the horn up, take me to the grocery store. And that was it for the lesson. But what it did do for me that I didn't know before is that it did create, as someone mentioned, just the mechanics to do one thing right. And I teach all of my, or I tell my students, I tell my friends, I tell my children, how you do one thing tends to be how you do everything. It's just kind of human nature. And so the meticulousness that it took to be able to play a concert F, to perfection, to the point that we could finally get to concert, G, or whatever the case, that is what kind of influenced the way I approached the horn from that point forward. And it wasn't all about embouchure. It wasn't all about posture. It was 100% about how it sounded and how it felt. And just kind of taking that into consideration, the correct way to get what you want, because there's no one way to skin a cat, so to speak. So you can get a great sound doing a whole lot of terrible things. That's just the way the instrument works. But for him to sit there, and when I say meticulously, and the ironic part about Prof was that he was legally blind in one eye and actually blind in the other. So he's never really looking at you in the first place. He was just listening, but he could hear every little thing. Oh, that was an improper breath. No, the attack was terrible. The follow through. It was so many nitpicky things just to play this one note. But again, that translated to everything else that I ended up doing since then up until now on the instrument. So what I take from that I think is an important lesson is that you do, even if everything is going well, you have to take those opportunities to just make sure that you're doing something right. Just one thing, because that one thing could very well be the catalyst for the rest of your playing. I've met a lot of great players that have no idea how the hell they're doing what they do. And I've let a lot of great players who know exactly how they're doing what they do and can convey that to you in a way to get you to do the same thing as them. And I envy the latter, because I feel as though that has been the thing that's been, that those lessons have been the most effective teaching tools for me. A lot of times my students, and I have students that range from elementary level up until, working to people older than me, in fact. But the thing that's beautiful about it is there is something to be said for that thread that exists and just finding that one thing to do right and kind of taking it from there. So when you're talking about rebuilding, you know, it's no telling what you can fix if you just sit down and take a look at it, because you may not even know what you're doing wrong in the first place. So I just think it's very important to acknowledge the importance of just one thing, just whatever that thing is, just that one damn thing. And yeah, that's my Miyagi moment.
Melvin, I think that's a really good point that I didn't even think about up to now, but I think I mean, we're all scared of like breaking our face or getting cancer or COVID or anything that you guys have already gone through. But I think even scarier than that is going through something like that and having been the type of player who just played great and didn't know how you were doing it. Because I mean, when I was in Interlochen, I mean, thank God I was just in high school, but when I went through that bullying process and I went from being able to play principal to being able to do nothing. I was a natural player. So I just heard it and I played it. And then I couldn't do anything anymore. And I had no idea how to get back because I didn't know how I did anything. And I think, you know, for anybody who's listening, if you haven't been through the affliction yet, that you will face in your life, I think it's an encouragement right now to really like Melvin is suggesting, learn how to do one thing well and exactly how you do it. I always refer to it as I know my face. You know, if I have 5 minutes to warm up or 50 minutes to warm up or no time to warm up, someone's called me at midnight and wants me to play something on the phone, you know, which has never happened, but hypothetically, you know. Ryan's my neighbor, guys. I know my face. I can pick up, you know, the horn and do it, but I could not have done that before the affliction. So, so I think that's a huge asset to know. Attendees, we're going to have to close up shop here pretty soon. I just want to encourage you to, if you have any questions on any specific things that our panelists have talked about or any advice, please throw it up in the question and answer little chats at the bottom of your screen. I think for a final thought for anybody who hasn't had a chance to speak, I was thinking 2 things I was curious about. You know, if future self could go to past self, what's the worst thing you did in the rebuild, or what's the best thing you did in the rebuild? And a couple of you have mentioned some things, but for those of you who maybe have been thinking about what everybody else is talking about, what's the best or worst thing you did in the rebuild process?
I can be fast. For me, the best thing is that I just treated myself like my own student. Because everything Melvin's saying, he's like, yeah, you would tell your student that if they're doing something wrong, you wouldn't let them go on. You do it. And the other thing is like recognizing like rebuild, like I don't even really think of it as rebuilding. It's building. Like that player's gone, you know, pour some out for your homie, you know, but it's just like, yeah, you're a new player now, become that new player and do that. And if once I let go of that and just started playing the next thing, it was way easier. So
probably the worst thing I did, since I was working professionally when the dystonia hit, I kept, and I've always just been a full-time freelancer. I haven't had a salaried position with an orchestra or anything. I took work when I shouldn't have, when I was physically not capable of doing it. And there's a couple ones in particular that I definitely regret taking. So it took me about 3 months to realize I needed to take a step back. And I'm still kind of paying for that. But the best thing I did was taking that step back. And it was a gut punch. It was a knock to the ego. As much as I hate to admit it, because I've always been a go-getter. And for about 3 months, I wasn't getting anything. I was playing a middle F. So that's easily the best and worst things that I did.
The best thing that I did was just listen and rediscover beautiful sounds. Sometimes we get that tunnel vision in our everyday practice of, I got to get better, I got to sound better. But sometimes you just need to sit back and, you know, listen to that, you know, 1 millionth recording of the David concerto or something, and just rediscover the beauty of sound. And so when you do get back on the horn, you can be like, that's the sound that I want. Because if it's in your head, you'll be able to play it.
I think the best, or the worst thing that I did during my recovery was just trying to do too much too soon. Like most of us, I feel like, just fell into that trap. But the best thing I feel like that I did when I was going through recovery was I was in therapy when I was doing it also. So I was in a really kind of a weird spot in my life. I had just finished my undergrad degree. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. I was a full-time nanny. I wasn't really like I had a summer gig. I had my racetrack gig, but I wasn't like super established in the scene. I wasn't doing a lot of stuff other than that. So I was nannying and working like a bunch of jobs on the weekends and stuff like that. And then I had this thing where I fell on my face. So I just was really unsure about life and my direction in life. And then I had this injury and I just didn't have the coping mechanisms and I was out of school, so I didn't really have like a studio or like a really full-time teacher that I was talking to. So I just didn't really have, and I don't live I'm from St. Louis originally, so I don't live by my family. So I think that was the best thing, to just kind of go and figure it out with somebody who had tools to help you deal with something that is not something that you weren't expecting. So that I think that was the best possible thing that I could have done for myself in that moment, other than seeking the help of other teachers and mentors. But really just somebody who could help you on the mental aspect as well was like really really huge.
I would say that I would I concentrated on this is more of a from a trumpet standpoint, I guess. Um, but breathing, breathing and stretching actually are the two things that I feel like I neglected for so many years as a touring musician. Breathing and yeah, so many teachers told me growing up, it's all about air, it's all about air, it's all about air, and I just let it go in one ear, not the other, for a very long time. But once I learned how to do it properly, like wow, made a really really big difference. And that was just like literally a few months ago that I learned how to breathe, I think. So look out, I guess.
I'll just chime in because the doctor's best advice for rehab, not just on the tuba, but just to get back to everything that life requires. They said I had to breathe and I had to move. So anything that I could do every day to be better at breathing and to be better at moving was the most important thing for rehabbing everything, because everything needed to be recovered. It wasn't just a lip injury or a jaw. It was it was pretty substantial. So yeah, that's it. Every day I move and every day I breathe a lot. Breathing exercises are great. Moving really, really, really helps your breathing. So whether you're a runner or a cyclist or an indoor cyclist like I am in Calgary, find something that gets the air moving and gets the air moving to all the parts of your lungs that you don't know how to use or haven't been using. And it helps immensely. I'll also just piggyback and say the biggest mistake that I made was thinking that there was a rush and a timeline to get back. I pushed myself as hard as I could, and I was back on stage performing with the orchestra 3 months after my stem cell transplant, which felt like a really, really, really important thing at the time. And 3 months after I returned to work, COVID hit, and then there was no orchestra to play with. And once COVID was here, I kind of stopped and said, what was the rush? Why did I need to be back there? And it was really tied to ego, that, even in the depths of everything, I'm still fighting that ego of the demands I want to put on myself and the expectations that I feel like I should constantly be reaching. And the more that you can separate yourself from your ego and recognize when that's coming into play, I think you'll have an easier time conquering some of these demons and coming out the other side of whatever trauma a lot better.
Every day. You kept saying every day, and I think that's really important. Like I said, I try to play the trumpet every day, and I messed up twice, I admit. But it's so hard to do anything every day, and being a brass player is truly about consistency. I think a lot of things are, as you'll find out.
So,
Letting go of the ego
oh,
is really hard for trumpet players, but it's important. And I think probably the best thing that I did was asking for help. The first time when it was a stress and a mental thing, I had a teacher that I had worked with, and going and seeing him, and like we talked for an hour, didn't even pick up a trumpet, and that helped so much. But asking for help when it was the physical thing, going to a doctor, like you know your body, and when you know something's wrong, go get help.
so let me jump in with the best and worst thing here. So for me, I think probably the best, so probably the worst thing definitely is, and I feel like I've gotten past this now. So maybe this is like a benefit or a silver lining. Is not allowing my self-worth as a person to be directly correlated with my ability to play the trumpet, because I could do I could do so much more than just play the trumpet. And immediately, like when something happens and it's bad, then like you start thinking, it's like, oh, what am I going to do? Or because what can I do? It's like and I feel for me that has been a couple times like where all of that energy I could have focused on something else. Like all of this negative energy I could have, or self-pity, like, oh, I injured myself or something happens, like instead I could then be focusing on something else that I'm great at, maybe arranging some music or composing new music or teaching or do something else besides physically actually playing the trumpet. But then I think definitely the best thing besides learning that perspective is probably just getting to know myself and my body better, and being more in tune with what I'm actually doing, because I feel like that long term that has the greatest implications.
I think another important point when you talk about the best and worst thing is to kind of just embrace the instrument for what it is. Like for me, it like the trumpet's not the same thing for everybody. The instrument's not the same thing for everybody. The profession itself is not the same thing for everybody. For me, when I would take on gigs, at least for the last 10 years or so, I don't consider myself getting paid money. I consider I'm getting paid rent, or I'm getting paid, daycare. Again, family of five here. So for me, I'm getting paid support for my family of five. So for me, that's what the trumpet was. And I think when it came time to deal with that specific injury, I would not allow myself to deal with it properly because of the stress of the responsibilities that the instrument represents for me. And I think it's important that you have to find that balance, because in a previous webinar, I mentioned that COVID has been a blessing in disguise, and it has given me the opportunity to be home more than I have been in over a decade. And so in this time, I've become a lot more present in my children's life, in my family, life as well. And with the ability to work from home just as frequently as I was working in the world before, it's provided me the opportunity to still provide for them and be here with them. I will say that I am terrified of what the world will be like once things do finally start to come back, because I don't know if I will be the same person I was before this. Before this, I will take whatever work, wherever, because I knew where it was going. Now, is it worth leaving? Do I really need to miss my kids' play at school? Do I need to miss this opportunity to pick them up from school? It's a lot of little things that have changed for me now. And I wonder, in going forward, if I, like I said, if I will respond the same to the types of opportunities that are kind of just waiting, on the other side of this thing. So I would say that in the term of not necessarily in rebuilding, someone made a good point, is building in general. That now that you have this building point, to really embrace exactly what this instrument is for you, or exactly what this profession is for you, so that you can compartmentalize it and prioritize it properly, so that there is still room for whatever your actual life is outside of the instrument. If this is meant to support the life, then the worst thing you can do is not have that life there once it's supported. So, you know, I think it is in building, just making sure that you build things in a way that while this is you, it's still just a part of you. And it can be as important as it still is now, but it's still, you know, just make sure that you're honest about what that is until, you know, before it's too late, before some sort of trauma takes it away. Like, if this is your fallback thing, if this is your therapy, then what happens if this therapy is gone? Then do you crumble? Do you disintegrate under the pressures of the rest of the world? So I think the most important thing that you can do right now is, before it gets to that point, just really be honest about what all of this stands for you. So that's my worst.
It's amazing. Everything we're all talking about it is, and I think Jay was speaking to this also, every trauma everybody's talked about, it is ringing true to what I've mentally been going through as we've been going on a year of COVID. Because yeah, you can stay strong for so long. We've all gone through so many changes over the year that we keep on telling ourselves, oh, this is temporary, this is temporary. But is it, you know, is it, what's it going to look like in the future? And I think all of you have gone through that too. If you went through a huge physical change, chemotherapy, you know, your bodies are changing in a way that you don't know if you're going to be the same coming out on the other side. And I, you know, this discussion has helped me immensely, because I think I've been really getting a little overly anxious about everything. It's, you know, every single little health thing now I get worried about, just because of the last year of telling myself something's going to be temporary, or you know, the mentality we've all kind of got into, which I don't know if there's a good way of describing it. I think Jay was trying to describe it also, but we're in this weird state, you know, can't really plan for the future, but we want a future. We want
stasis.
We want what we had, but we don't want what we had. You know, there's just so much out there. And I think everything that you guys are all proof that we can rebuild no matter what the situation is. It's just that we keep on building. So we are hitting the 2-hour mark, and I think we could go so much more with this, which we will. I actually have been in conversations with Chip Krautz. I really wanted him on this event also, but we'd already set the time before I talked with him. So, but I was talking with him about doing a special webinar just with him and, you know, a couple of artists, again, maybe focusing on Bell's palsy and dystonias, as I believe there's some connection, but we need to discuss that a little bit more. But so we will do another one of these. I also wanted to get a little bit on the product side of things, because as our physical bodies change through different injuries or different struggles, you know, what does that say about our product? And, you know, about, you know, one of the things that hasn't come up, it's come up here and there, but, you know, focusing on beautiful sound. Someone in this webinar was saying that, I think it might've been you, Melvin, that you can create beautiful sound in a lot of unhealthy ways. And that in itself has caused a lot of people into injury. And something that we always bring up in mouthpiece deciding with Dennis Wick is, you know, you got to lead with sound, because if you don't lead with sound, you might pick a mouthpiece that lets you play really high, but then your body has to facilitate how to get to that correct sound, or, you know, which can cause injury. So yeah, I think there's a lot more we can go down this path with injury and recovery and good health and playing. So thank you everybody so much for tonight. I'm always humbled by the end of these webinars, because we have such a wealth of wisdom and experience in this artist group. And I am just always humbled to be able to work with you guys, because it's just amazing hearing more and more about you every single time we get together. So until the next webinar, I hope you guys all stay safe and warm, and don't slip on any ice. Don't catch COVID.
Yeah, or balance your weight when you're on the ice.
Balance your weight better.
That was what I took from that ceremony.
Yes. Stay in touch. For attendees, the email that you got this link at is my email address. So if you have any questions or suggestions for future webinars, feel free to reach out. And as I mentioned before, you'll be receiving an email in the near future with links to the uploaded webinars onto our YouTube site. So stay safe, stay healthy, everybody, and we'll see you at a future webinar. Good night.
Thanks, Mary.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Monica.
Thanks, guys.